Well, thank you so much. It's a pleasure. And we've just gotten acquainted here with Darren, a couple of phone calls and a nice long conversation there in the back. And I think based on our conversation with Ivan, we're poised to talk about the results that you're aiming to deliver. And so if you'd please tell us about you, what you do, and the results that you're looking to achieve.
My name is Darren Curtis. Thank you very much for having us here today, or having me here today. I come out of the Office of Secretary of Defense, so that's OSD back in the Pentagon, but we focus on manufacturing and manufacturing policy. So that ends up being something that's, I guess the fun aspect of this. This is one of those few areas within DoD where we can actually touch every single program within the Department of Defense. Because everything, when it comes down to it, everything, including software, has to be made. And that's something that we can get into in a second here with our Title X authorities, but we are, from a legal standpoint, Congress has allowed us to step forward and be able to be an asset. So that's one of the things I'd love to be here to help you guys out. If anybody who is an existing part of the defense supply chain and they want to improve themselves, or if they're a non-traditional actor and they want to get into the Department of Defense or start working with the government, that's something our office is ready to step forward and help you with.
What does it look like when you get to work in the morning? What do you do?
Okay, well, so if I'm not traveling, that's the first step. Get up and I actually sit and reside in Southern California in San Diego area.
And so, why is that?
Probably multiple stories behind that, but the primary one is we identified that we've got, say, 30, 40,000 employees within the DoD, and they don't all need to sit in the Pentagon, because a lot of the folks we want to interface with, especially when you start talking manufacturing and production, they don't live in the Virginia, Maryland area. So we actually have identified this being in Southern California because of the proximity to so much critical industrial base that actually resides here in the area, as well as just commercial production capacity. Having somebody and having a presence on the West Coast has allowed our team kind of like a foothold on the West Coast. And we can also get into this a little bit too. Our office is uniquely positioned because we're looking at international. So my focus on the West Coast, I've kind of been donned as the PACOM representative. So for those, the PACOM region would be the entire Pacific Rim, right? So we're looking at some of our critical allies, Australia, United Kingdom, Canada. Of course, UK is more on the other side of the ocean, but Japan, Australia, we've actually had a lot of interaction with those folks as well. So that's something we can kind of get into if people have specific interests. But we're looking at also kind of elevating our game from not only a domestic footprint, but also international, how we can augment and assist.
So have you been connecting or successful in connecting companies here in Southern California with some of these opportunities, with either the DoD or abroad? Yes. Initially, we only have about 5 people critical in, I guess, the SMEs, the subject matter experts in our department. So we have to kind of be a little bit pick and choose what we're really going to go after. So we've developed our top 10 list, and I can kind of speak in general terms about what those are going to be. But I guess if anyone familiar with the DoD, the F-35 program, and that's actually something where I cut a significant portion of my background I spent with the program office back in DC and doing the policy as well as the science and technology maturation. So actually, how do we stand up, look at the forward requirements and see what the industrial base capabilities are, what's the internal investments that are going on within the industrial base, so say Lockheed Martin, Northrop Grumman, BAE, some of the heavy hitters that are main supply chain, what are they investing in from an IRAD perspective, and what are we doing with our small business innovative research funding dollars from each of the services, so the Navy, the Air Force, and those folks. So just being careful of jargon, you said IRAD. Is there some context you can give for that?
Internal research and development dollars. So it's money that a company, so say if you're a DoD supplier, within the DoD supply chain, you're allowed to spend, or you're expected to expend a certain amount of your profit back on IRAD. So you're developing projects that will then be future production or future IP for the company. That's something I think traditionally we've shied away as a department. We don't necessarily have the legal ability to step in and tell, company XYZ how they're going to expend their IRAD. But I think that's where some kind of the conversation breaks down, because just because we can't direct them how to spend their IRAD legally, maybe there's a way we could sit down and have an open conversation saying, here's where we as a department are going, here's what the areas we have needs and requirements, how can we assist the company to develop a next generation product that will make them profit and actually serve us in funding requirements earlier and actually forward lead some of our issues that we're facing.
Now you've mentioned policy or used the word policy a couple of times. There's one particular executive order that immediately springs to mind. It's that 13806. What can you tell us about what's in play there and how it might affect Southern California?
It's an interesting read. I encourage anyone who wants to go out and read that. That was something that came out of the White House, and there's been a lot of activity on our side to try to go out and assess this. Unfortunately, we're not going to be able to talk about much about that one.
Anybody can read what it is online. Yeah. So if you can just give us the thrust of what it is and kind of bring it home for how it might, sure, people might think about it here.
Sure. I mean, I think one of the there's several different areas we identified that would be of interest, and we need to go, solutions we need to go find. And something we tried to boil it down to, hey, what are some of the things of the industrial base across the board, whether they're defense, traditional defense, or they're not traditional, non-traditional. One thing that resonates with me too is workforce development. And I know we talked a little bit about the clearance process, and that ends up being kind of a sticking point, especially when we talk about bringing non-traditional defense suppliers in. How do we actually augment and assist folks to increase their access to human capital? Because a lot of what comes down to at the end of the day, it's what our human, what the human side of things is actually going to bring to the table for the next product for a company. And a lot of that is predicated on having a diverse workforce. So you have the new guys coming out of college, maybe coming out of USC. You also have the graybeards, the guy that worked on the SR-71 program or something. They're going to tell you the war stories of launching satellites and shuttles. And you need a diversified workforce. But that's something that I think that we end up kind of glossing over, saying, oh, we'll be fine. There's always someone who wants to work for us. And I take no stance on this, it's purely anecdotal, but it's something that actually hit home since we've lived in California now for 3 years. There are certain states that have legalized certain substances that are not federally legal, but they're legal at the state level, right? And that's something that, that's out of my pay grade. I'm not going to get into that discussion. But one of those things that they don't really talk about is, okay, there's kids that are at 14 years of age and they're thinking, what do I want to be when I grow up? Do I want to be a software engineer? Do I want to be a machinist? Do I want to be a programmer? There's a whole host of things they can go do. But one of the key points too is they may or may not see our offices, our departments as being a valid career path. And the other thing too is no one takes the time to actually educate these younger kids, or it's very, very seldom do you find the opportunity where they're willing to receive the guidance. And we can actually tell them, hey, here's what it's like a day in the life of a DoD employee. Here's a program we're working on. And also tell them, like, hey, by the way, you've got 4 or 5 years ahead of you before you really become a part of an eligible workforce member. Here's some guidelines that you want to maintain in maybe lifestyle choices you can kind of go down. Because again, it gets very, very tricky. You start talking about state level rules versus federal level rules. And personally, I've had discussions with people back in DC, and you'd be surprised how many people that are federal employees that actually still don't understand the difference between state and federal. That's a bit of a deviation, but we've identified there's a critical workforce, because if somebody has chosen a certain path and they've used certain substances, that could impact their ability to gain a clearance, which then would mean they would not be eligible to come and work for us. So that,
if I hear you right, then, for this executive order that's focused basically on the assessment and strengthening of the manufacturing industrial base, then the defense industrial base, that workforce is one of the critical issues, just period.
Yeah, I think that's something that's fair, because we see that as being, we need people to do the work. So, it is a. And I think the other thing too is we're also talking about things that are beyond the DoD, because I think workforce goes to everybody, especially you talk about manufacturing. Our office, again, we focus on manufacturing and the industrial base. So we need people out there doing the critical skills like welding. That's something that we found from a DoD application. We need folks that can do big ship welding. And that is something that's not going to be taken over by robots anytime soon. We still need people that are skilled and knowledgeable how to weld thick plate steel together to make these big holes that we have in the ocean. But we're finding we don't have enough welders. We've spent so much energy elevating our game, saying everyone needs to go off and get a college education, that now we've found we do not have enough people in the blue collar work, the traditional blue collar skill sets that are able to do these jobs. And the funny anecdote we've been finding is, you might think that I'm going to make more money being a software engineer. Well, you're going to rack up 4 years plus of school debt, and then you come out of that and you're going to have to compete for a job. We're finding that from a welding perspective, I believe I can't quote you what year it was, but I've heard that we imported 20,000 Polish welders into the southern Gulf state region because we were that short of welders. So anybody that says they don't have a job is like, well, hey, let's send you off to a trade school. Let's get you spun up on how to be a welder. And within 2 years, I've heard anecdotally 2 to 3 years, you could be making 6 figures.
Is your office doing anything about that in particular?
So that's something we identified, that we need to take an active role, an active hand in identifying some of these issues and how can we assist the industrial base. So again, we identified that there's a shortage of workers for welding. So we said, what can we do? From a policy standpoint, we can actually approach it for welding skills challenge. So that's actually something we're in the works of doing right now, we're releasing. And this is going to be a pilot program. So we're going to say, we're going to focus on, we've identified there's a shortage of welders. How do we generate more welding? Well, we need to do a PR campaign. We need to go educate people and say, hey, this is a valid career path. Here's where this goes. Here's the industries you can go in. And we can also do matchmaking. So we're going to come up with a skills challenge. I think there's a lot of kind of like STEM education outreach programs. And this would be something that we would put together an event, have a challenge for students that, you're talking the high school to college, the 18 to 25-year-old region, age groups. Encourage them to come and compete and actually showcase their skills.
So is this in the planning stage, or is there something that's already materialized? Where are we in the process?
It's in the planning stages, but you know, I think being the government, that's one thing we can talk about with this is we're trying to do things better. We're trying to do better business, and I think some of you, if you're familiar with the acquisition cycles, you know, there's a better business, a better buying power. There's a couple different programs we've put out, but something that, you know, we really need to do things better, and where we can't do things better, we need to identify others in the community that can do it for us. So in this case, we have actually reached out to several industry partners who have put together, they're willing to put skin in the game and also mentor and manage these programs. So it's going to become this public-private partnership to go put it on an event, which is going to generate more students that have critical skills to go meet the need, today's need as well as the future need. These slides right here are just going to walk through what our broader group is. So for those, I come from OSD, again, Secretary of Defense Office in the Pentagon. You have each of the services that have their own mission set and the requirements, and we're kind of a managing body across all domains. So our office, we're industrial policy. So I believe that the actual name is INDPOL, INDPOL. And we focus, I think here, I'm not sure what the person on I think we have some electronics work, and then of course we have the F-35. We look at, from a department policy, we call ourselves a purple program. So we actually get involved in all aspects, all programs across all the services. And what's unique, I think, about our office as well, from the IBAS, Industrial Base Analysis and Sustainment, we're willing to reach beyond the industrial base that currently provides product to the defense departments. We want to engage with the non-traditional defense departments. And again, that kind of goes back to the question of why am I on the West Coast? We're here because we care. We want to get to know folks. We want to know what the requirements are, what the industries need, and how can we bring it back to our leadership and say, hey, we've communicated with local industry. We've communicated with those that maybe haven't traditionally supported the Defense Department, and here's kind of their list of demands. What can we go to meet those demands, to bring them in and both help them be more profitable as a business and as a nation, and then also selfishly we get better product.
And how do you get educated in that regard? Are you engaging industry? Are they coming to you? What are the channels?
A bit of both. Some of it is you know, just boots on the ground. My boss, Adele Radcliffe, she's very much a proponent of go get your hands dirty. Go figure out the problems. Don't just sit in a boardroom and discuss with executives or engineers what the problem is. Get on the line. Right here we actually see the F-35 being made. Walk that line, see the issues. Talk to the guys that are actually, you know, they're bucking rivets or they're having issues with, you know, software loads or whatever it's going to be. Go and learn firsthand. And then also elevate your game and go talk to the program managers, go talk to the supply chain. So we don't just want to go, in this case, Lockheed Martin is the prime for the F-35. We're not just interested in Lockheed Martin because we do want to talk to them, but we also want to dig down to the third, fourth, fifth tier supply chain. We care about everything from soup to nuts. The end product that rolls off the line and takes flight and goes off into the Pacific region to go to missions, roll it all the way back to the critical materials, the rare earth metals, the titaniums, the aircraft grade aluminums, like where is that raw stock coming from and how sustainable is that access and supply chain? And again, that's something that when we start doing that analysis from the defense perspective, that actually rolls directly back into the industrial base, the broader industrial base, because everybody needs access to those materials. So we're willing to step up our game, map out, you know, the entire supply chain, where things reside, where are the shortages and shortfalls, and how can we as a department go and help it out? And also from the public-private partnership model, how can we start engaging with local communities to go fix these issues? So we're not doing it in a silo by ourselves, we're engaging whole of government, whole of the nation.
And you say whole of government, does that include state and local and all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, again, because our unique position within the department, we have the authorities to go out and we're talking to other agencies. We do a lot of work with Department of Energy, so they actually have a whole group that focuses on advanced manufacturing. And that's been a great partnership because they have their own mission set meeting the nation's energy needs, and there's a couple other unique mission sets they dive into. But they have, 8 or 9 labs across the United States. So that's beyond the DoD, that's DOE, Department of Energy. We work with Department of State when we start talking about international. What are some of the things we were willing to go off and do and invest and bring information home to our industrial base? We have to be tightly coupled with the embassy folks that are overseas, so it ends up being a very, very broad, diverse group we can work with.
You're talking about working with groups. Can you tell us a bit about the Machine Tool Working Group?
So another thing that we've identified in doing these engagements with the industry is well, I'll take a step back, is one of the fun things I've heard my boss, what really resonated with me as she's given a lot of lectures and she's been very highly engaged with the communities, is talking about how do we exit World War II. So we ramped up, we went into World War II, we ramped up our production. We identified we needed to convert existing manufacturing lines into things that would be useful tools for the Defense Department. And how did we do that? We had different authorities as a government we were able to leverage. We had budget lines we were able to go buy materials and push things off the line. But the problem was we exited World War II with 250 machine tool manufacturers Today we have about 5. And out of those 5, only 1 of them is US owned. So to go from 250 down to 5/1, that to us ends up being a bit of a critical issue because we look at the machine tool manufacturers, that's the baseline of production for us. We identify that as being the folks that are actually going to make what we need. So to put it in real terms, what does that mean? Well, right now we're reliant on foreign nations to ship us product so our manufacturing and industrial base can actually cut metal, right? So if we look at critical machine tooling, you know, the multi-axis machines, high tolerance, gimbals and all that, we're looking at a lot of Japanese, German manufacturing systems, which we have a good relationship with them, but we're talking about an 18-month lead time for the tooling. So if I come and identify, hey, I'm working on program X, Y, and Z, here's our critical path, and we've identified a manufacturing issue, well, we're 18 months behind schedule just from the start if we identify the issue right now and actually go put money against that. So we've identified, well, is there a way we can do that better? One way is to actually, you know, we're not the first in line when we go to the Germans and ask for this machine tooling. They're usually going to rack us a little bit lower sometimes. And what happens if we get into an international conflict in one of the countries we're reliant upon for our industrial-based supply chain? They decide they don't want to feed us that product or that machine tool. What's going to happen? So we want to bring that capability back home. We're still going to have international partnerships. We're not going to cut them out. But we want to make sure that we have the ability here stateside to address our needs and our requirements. And so that, again, goes back to there's a DoD need, and then there's a very much a larger community of non-DoD that has the same requirements. So we're looking at doing the outreach and doing the machine tool working group is kind of the first step of saying, let's go poll the audience. Let's go figure out what the industrial base needs and characterize, kind of build that hit list of what we can go do. And then as a government public-private partnership model, build a center of excellence to go, I guess, categorize the requirements and then go start fielding solutions against that and restand up a machine tool working group.
So if I understand, essentially the thrust of what you're saying is not existing within our current industrial base certain capabilities that do exist based on Japanese and German
and Chinese
technology.
And other places, yeah.
Sure, and so the DoD is willing to get behind that and bankroll to some degree, stand up the ability, and if it is cost effective, then there will be a commercial application on top of what you're doing.
Yeah, I think there's a strong focus where if whatever we do, it doesn't have to be a subsidies program, where if we can find that, we call it dual use technologies, dual use capabilities, where if we do something that is government DoD related and also public, you know, the non-DoD related, we love to see that model because we're in the business of making things better and improving the government however we can. We're trying to characterize the issues and make things better. But the fact is that sometimes the commercial market is going to be better streamlined and better positioned to go attack these problems. So if we can build a dual use technology or the public-private partnership model where we can have the best of both worlds, we can leverage some of the riskier investments on the DoD side along with the streamlined, productive, and profitable commercial side of it. That only helps us because, you know what, we don't have to subsidize an entire industrial base to focus on our needs. Where, so I've seen examples where we put $5 million into a facility to kick out 5 things, right? Well, in the commercial sector, they're talking about putting out hundreds of thousands, if not 1 million products. And we're subsidizing the entire fabrication line to just make sure they're available to make 5 things for us on a reoccurring basis. If you're an engineer or if you're someone working on the line, you're a technician, what gives you like the passion to go get behind your work and do something good? Unless some people do it because they love the mission. But other times we're losing people because they see no value added in being a producer of 5 when they can go to the industry, make more money, and make 1,000 or 100,000 or 1 million.
Which is why the dual use is so important. That way it's not hurry up and wait so all you're doing is DoD work.
Yeah, and that's a great way where we don't have to subsidize. If we can find, it's not always applicable, sometimes we do have to subsidize, right? But where we can find those areas, those good synergies where it's the DoD needs as well as the public sector needs, we can have a lot of traction with that. And we can actually there's some strong partnerships we can link up.
I think a lot of us are comfortable with the idea of the DoD being the customer, but it sounds like you've got a whole lot of other pockets that you're able to access in order to try and grease the skids with dollars. Can you describe some of that?
So I guess one thing right now that we're doing, again, we mentioned I'm in California, Southern California, San Diego. I'm looking Pacific region. We have this thing called NTIB, National Technology Industrial Base, and that is something that we've identified with our Five Eyes community. So our traditionally the English-speaking nations where you have Australia, United Kingdom, Canada, and Northern Ireland in this case. And we've decided, well, we've identified that, hey, there's an opportunity that if we're so tightly coupled with these nations, how can we elevate our ability to co-produce or from an industrial-based perspective, how do we support each other? So leveraging this NTIB, it's in development. There's the previous program, I believe, is called NTIBO, But NTIB is something, if anybody in the area has any kind of tie with those nations, Australia, Canada, UK, Northern Ireland, we're looking at programs that we can do dual investment with those nations and the United States to do, basically remove the barriers of entry to actually have collaborative research, collaborative production environments. We've actually stood up another thing. There's an OTA, Other Transactional Authority, which I know we were talking about earlier. And that actually leads into this, where we see the Other Transactional Authority as something we can look back at how we've done business if you're familiar with DFARS. So that's the FAR-based contracting. It's a regulation of how the DoD puts money on contract and buys things. We can sit there and take 12 months of negotiation sometimes, where if you look at the public sector, very few companies would actually stick around for 12 months to negotiate. They want to see something, you maybe get 2 meetings, but at the end of that second week, you're going to have contracts in hand and signed. So we go back to the OTAs. OTAs, Other Transactional Authorities, is something it's a government tool that's been around since the 40s. And I believe it was NASA that was the original authors of this. And they did a great job of saying, hey, there's certain, you can't use this for all acquisition programs, but this is a valuable tool. So I'd offer it up to you folks if you're interested. We've built this consortia-based OTA, Other Transactional Authority. It's the only OTA that I'm aware of that is actually managed by the government. All the other OTAs that are out there actually have contractors.
A consortium manager, yeah.
Consortium manager. Our consortia is actually managed by the Rock Island. It's in Illinois, Rock Island Arsenal, so the Army contracting. But it's Cornerstone. So if you look up Cornerstone and IBAS, I-B-A-S, you should link to it through Google, and it'll be the Rock Island Arsenal folks. And you can actually sign up online. Let's see here. Right here, I know it's kind of small print, but again, if you just look up Army and Cornerstone and OTA, Other Transactional Authority, that'll map you to a website. And this is something I encourage anybody who's interested, go to the website, take a look at it. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to Libby and myself, and I can point you towards our contracting officers. But once you join this Cornerstone, that's up to you. You can review the materials, you sign a contractual management agreement, CMA, and then you can identify what of your systems, if you can find something here where your product that you work on fits within, we can actually help you and assist you if you are a current government supply chain, in the current government supply chain, or if you're looking to get into it, but you just don't want, you've got some programs that maybe you can't wait as long as some of the contracting. So also, the reason I pause is we're supposed to be doing this for prototyping. That's one of the stipulations. There's rules, and there are some rules where we can and can't use the Cornerstone OTA. But I'd encourage you, if you're interested, reach out and we can coach you through it. And the beautiful thing is with a prototype, most of everything that we make, especially if we're doing a new production line or if we're integrating a new product into the defense supply chain, you need a prototype to start with to qualify it.
Now, does this tie to your sort of personal mission of the incubation of next generation technologies?
Yeah, this becomes a part of the arsenal of how we're going to go forward and actually fix the problems. So this is kind of fun because this actually talks about what we legally can and can't do. They call it our Title 10 authorities. And I've worked on programs in the past where they're very restrictive. I couldn't touch software because that was a separate engineering department. We couldn't do systems engineering because that was somebody else. The fun thing is they identified that we need to be able to have the access to go out and make a difference rapidly. We need to be able to reach out and bring innovation. So it's similar to, like, if people are familiar with DIUX, Defense Unit Experimental, and I believe they actually just changed their name as well. Now it's Defense Innovation Unit, DIU. So they're the folks up in Silicon Valley. And we're looking at the model that they've done there, saying, okay, there's something powerful to be saying, again, not being in the Pentagon, you maintain a presence in the Silicon Valley area, in the San Jose area. You develop kind of a safe environment to reach out to the non-traditional folks that have interesting supply chain or interesting technology solutions, and then how do we bring them into the family? How do we get them in? So yeah, this becomes one of the OTA becomes an arsenal or part of our tool that we can actually implement that in a rapid succession. Because I think one of the biggest limiting factors for bringing in commercial folks to the DoD is, again, the timelines, that we get so used to doing 12-month negotiations with the OEM suppliers, the major original equipment manufacturers, that some of the smaller businesses that are much more rapid, they may not have the appetite to negotiate for 12 months. So we need to kind of elevate our game and think of new novel ways to engage them, still abiding by all the rules and regulations and still using FAR-based contracting and BAAs, if you're familiar with Fed Biz Ops and those kind of things. We still utilize those tools as well, but the OTA becomes a critical tool in the set to help mitigate.
Are there other lessons learned that you can perhaps share with us regarding specialty vehicles like DIU or DIUX that might be beneficial for folks here to know about?
Well, I think one of the things I've learned is everybody has their opinion of something that's successful and not successful. I would encourage everyone that even if you have a bad relationship with if you just try to enter the government supply chain and you had a bad experience, don't think that's going to always be the case. Be willing to take a chance on us, and there will be someone that's willing to listen and help you out. I know access to funding is a big issue, and a lot of times people push the industry, especially the smaller businesses, to the SBIR process, the Small Business Innovative Research process, and that is, again, one of the tools, but that's by no means the only tool. So our office becomes kind of a focal point to help assist. That's what I hope to do, at least. And we can steer you towards DIU if there's something where we know that they're working on that you might be able to assist on, or if there's something that maybe there's an existing SBIR, we can go, instead of going through the process of a phase 1, 2, and 3, we can jump straight into a phase 2, or we can partner you up with another OEM. We can make the introduction to see if that's a relationship you'd like to build to help with the transition story. Now we also have, because of what we've been doing for such a broad group, again, we're not a specific service. We're not tied to a specific service. We're very broad reaching across all the departments and all the services. We can hit you up with some interesting folks that have interesting requirements, put it that way.
And how about connections with venture capital and things like that? Are you able to go so deep as that?
That's something that I have taken on as I'd like to explore more personally. Again, being on the West Coast and San Francisco is not too far away. That's been a fun introduction, but as I've been educated, I think along the way, that folks have always told me, hey, San Francisco is not the only place that has innovation. So a powerful tool that we found is actually, so I'll take a step back. I know we're using more acronyms than I'd like, but there's the combatant commands. So these are the folks that are in charge of all the different regions around the world. And we have a tech scouting group. So that's something actually I would love to say, to bring it back to the Southern California. What would you guys actually care about? I would love to start generating a tech scouting event at the local community level. So, looking at California, we're a major player in manufacturing. And that's one of the reasons I'm able to stay here. I thought this might have been a 6-month job. It's turning into 2+ years. And it doesn't look like I'm going back home to DC. So I'm here for good, I hope. I want to start generating some very, very relevant interest in generating technology, incubation, public-private partnerships in strategic locations. So that's going to take coordination with you folks. It's going to take coordination with the local California governor's office, which we've already had discussions with, and we're evaluating where and how can we play together. And then it's also, going back to the DC office and saying, hey, here's what resides in California, reminding them, here's what we have here in the area, and here's in our back door, we can use this. So we're really excited to try to evaluate and say, what are within our top 10 requirements, going back to the very beginning, how much of that could reside in California? And honestly, out of the top 10, at least 6 of those top 10, we find that in California. So we just want to make sure that people don't, people know that their voice is heard and their voice is valid, and we'd love to start generating more of that at the regional level. So it might start off being San Diego, LA, San Francisco, and also then, again, going back to the venture capital comment, bringing in that partnership with venture, and also I'd say private equity wealth. We found a lot of folks that are interested in reinvesting into the community. They're not a traditional venture capital. They're just someone who did very well at something in their life, and they're sitting on some funding that they would like to actually apply back into the national space. So we're looking at building those relationships and those partnerships for the betterment of the local community, as well as elevating up to the larger DoD, or I'm sorry, the larger United States.
You used a phrase a moment ago, perhaps it's a term of art, tech scouting. Can you help us understand what you mean by that?
So yeah, we've looked at it. I would say the COCOM, so it's CENTCOM, the folks that are doing all the activities in Afghanistan and Iraq, in that region of the world. Within the DoD, it's called CENTCOM. And there's some science and technology officers that reside within CENTCOM that started saying, we can find innovative solutions. We have a lot of stuff going on in our labs that's valuable. We need to keep churning that science and technology crank. But we also have a lot going on outside the DoD, outside the DOE, outside the government. And how do we go and access that? One of the things that we found was somebody came up with a novel system for blood clotting. So actually to promote faster blood clotting for if you have a massive wound and you need to get them to a forward operating hospital or something, but they physically are going to bleed out by the time you get there. We've actually found a company that had this novel product. You're able to apply it, and we help them get through FDA, I believe. I think we're in the process of, or they already have gone through FDA review. So that's something we got involved with, and we partnered them up with somebody else outside of our office, because we don't traditionally do medical supply devices, but we can help them with the manufacturing piece of this product. And so getting them back in, showing them where the money resides within the government, within the NHS and other departments. We had another one where there's somebody that came up with a novel, they actually leveraged an old SBIR, and we helped them through this tech scouting events that we're putting on or we're participating in, actually bringing up this science and technology idea and actually building into a production line. So pairing them up with the end customers, the users, and then also the money folks, the people that are holding on to the requirements. So the tech scouting, again, rolling it back to what California would be interested in, I would love to start that off with the COCOMs, CENTCOM and the other combatant commands to focus on California. So San Diego, LA, San Francisco. But that said, if anyone else has a great idea of another environment, another city they'd like to bring it in, I think we've got a lot of pull that we can get some people focused on this down here.
Well, somebody's been good enough to give us a really hard question, and so they'll save me the grief of asking it myself.
I'll see what I can do.
The Silicon Valley firms, and we've talked about this in our first phone call, some of them they have resisted DoD work because of either what they have written here, a small payoff, the procurement overhead, and IP conflicts. So one of the jokes I told you before is an old mentor of mine saying, the best advice for government contractors is don't do it because you've got a tough customer in an adversarial environment. So is there a solution that your office has been geared to try to provide?
I think one of the interesting things that we can do, let's take Silicon Valley as an example. I think a lot of folks, they want to make an investment and they want to see a return on that investment. So they're going to do something that maybe, let's just pick numbers and say they want to invest their money in something that has 80% or above 50% success rate, right? But that might not actually push the level of our understanding of technology. That might just be an incremental approach to improving something. What happens if we want to do that revolutionary? We want to change the game. Well, some of the investors may not actually see that as that's not, if it's a 20% success rate, they're not going to invest in it. You can roll that back, and that's where we can get that public-private partnership model working, where I know traditionally some people have a problem with working with the DoD, but going back to the blood clotting, not everything we do is building a death machine. I think that's something I've had to deal with in my career is so many programs I've been associated with had a certain mission set, and it wasn't necessarily a socially acceptable mission set. It wasn't building paper. It wasn't building houses. It had a certain mission, and it had to be very good at doing that. And not everybody agrees with that method and approach. And I don't begrudge anybody. Everyone is entitled to their own opinion. But the fun thing is we also do other things that is not geared towards that kind of mission. We do prosthetic limbs. We looked at additive manufacturing, advanced manufacturing processes. How can we assist some of these folks that are staying on unique ideas? And there's actually someone in the Southern California, LA area who's reached out to me. And I'm looking at working with him to he's got a great concept for new and improved prosthetic limbs. So we've got unfortunately, we have a need for that kind of capability. We have warfighters that are coming home their lives have been drastically impacted on their activities overseas. But we have the opportunity to go and invest in new technologies, new manufacturing processes that can give them better limbs, better new limbs, and actually return them to an environment where they can enjoy life again in a much more free, but not just be bedridden or sitting in a wheelchair. So that's, again, something where we don't just build things that go boom all the time. We can actually do good things.
Well, perhaps you answered one part of the question and dodged the more difficult one, but we'll let that slide. It's very difficult to change Uncle Sam as a customer, isn't it?
It is, but interesting enough, I think there's a lot of folks that are interested in having that conversation, whether you believe it or not. That has come up a lot. Is maybe we really need to take a hard look at how we do business, and so we're willing to have those conversations. We're ready to dive into it. And if you guys want to have that dialogue, I would love to be the conduit to elevate your conversation and bring it back to the policymakers back in D.C.
Now, we've got security clearances getting some votes, but I'm not sure that question is the one that you're most capable to address. Can you start by talking about how security clearances went from an abysmally long process to a much shorter, palatable process?
Yeah, I think I'll raise my hand and say I was one of the 21 million folks that lost all their entire private life. My wife, my family, everyone. I had the hard conversation. I came home one day and says, I think my stuff has been penetrated, right? So it's the OPM, right? They got hacked. They lost a lot of stuff. So my entire 10 years of my life history in a big 60-page document someone has out there. I'm fine. I'm still around. Nothing's impacted us yet, but I am monitoring my credit a little bit closer. But that process, as a part of that process, actually, originally when I came on, I want to say I was quoted 18 months to get my clearance, my first initial clearance set. And that's ridiculous, right? So I had to be put on kind of a dead PE, a dead charge number, to sit around and wait 18 months for my clearance to process before I could actually do the work I was hired to go do. Again, talking about some people don't want to do business with the government because we see that as acceptable. We were able there's other departments that looked at that and they addressed it and they knocked it down to 3 months. That's a lot better. I can do something in 3 months. Unfortunately, over time, it's now we're creeping back up into 12 plus months. Anecdotally, I know people that are waiting around. Again, we're going back up 15 months maybe. That is something we've identified. Is that acceptable? This is my personal opinion. No, that's not acceptable. We need to go and find something. So we're willing to have those conversations because, again, if you want to come onto some of our programs, are we going to have you sitting around waiting 15 months to get your clearance just so we can talk about what the requirements are for you to go cut metal? You know, there needs to be some workarounds. And so I think there's an interesting one right here about what can a student do while in high school to get security clearances or make getting security clearance in the future? One thing, I think it's actually, you know what, regional conversations, talking with Southern California, talking with the economic development councils. We can get our message out there. We can boil it down to what is a high school student going to resonate with. We can show them what the career paths are, what the different, you know, whether it's scientist or welder, we can get you the entire gamut, or doctor, or whatever it is, dentist. I know dentists that work in the DoD. I never knew the DoD had dentists.
But nobody's going to get a clearance, though, until there's a need for one, right?
Well, yeah, but there's some interesting pathways, and we're actually in active discussions with various members in the community. So there's active OEM, big major companies. They're looking at this saying, hey, you know, I have an entire building of people waiting for their clearances. That's, you know, basically the government's paying me to have people sit around and do nothing. So they're actively looking at how do we do that. And I think we've got some strategies we can actually, I don't know about high school necessarily. We can get the message out in high school to talk to them about it. But then in college, there actually looks like there could be some opportunities where we can get people pre-cleared or at least on the path to clearance during their college experiences.
So for those who are interested in this pre-clearance process, how would they go about pursuing that?
I would say this is a new one for me, so feel free to reach out and send me the information. I'd love to bring you into the conversation. If you have questions or if you have comments and you want to provide, that's something I think that I would love to characterize it and then present it to my leadership. Because I know they care, but you know, they've got 1,000 things to worry about. We just need to prioritize what we're going to go do. And I know this one is something that is bubbling up, so I'd be willing to, again, be that conduit and help carry the message back.
Do you have contact information that folks have been able to see up on the screen behind us?
I had it in one of the slides. I'm happy to, for anyone interested, I'm happy to give you my business card and write stuff down. Yeah, so, and I know Libby's got my information, and I'll say that she can hand it out to anyone who's interested. You contact Libby.
And I don't see Libby over there,
Yeah,
but I'm sure she's around. And how well do you know AMP SoCal? Because you're here at the event, you received the invitation. As an organization, I don't know if anybody's better positioned to connect the DoD with the manufacturing community. So have you gotten to know Jim Watson and his friends here at AMP SoCal?
No, I have not. So I'll be honest, this is my second event. The first event I was here a couple months ago, and through the conversation we identified, hey, this would be a powerful partnership to be involved with you folks. So I'd say this is my second time here, but I look forward to coming back again. And again, being available to have the conversations and work and see how we can be an asset and a help to the folks here locally. So yeah, I would like to meet you guys.
Excellent. And how about ITAR and export regulations? It's such a sticky wicket and so overwhelming to folks who are not among the initiated to have to deal with that kind of stuff. That overlay is amazingly complex. Can you speak to it? What do people need to know that you can tell them right now?
From an ITAR perspective, you know, this is the fun part where I can back away from the question. I'm not an ITAR expert, so whatever I say, please don't take it as gospel. I'd be guessing. I have worked foreign military sales, though, extensively for the F-35 program, so I'm aware of some of the issues we have in just trying to collaborate and even just get test data pushed from one country to another. I've been in situations where a country paid for test data, the test was executed by a U.S. company, and it took over 2 years to get the data sent back home so they could look through it, analyze it, and do their due diligence. And so that was a hard thing to watch happen because it was very frustrating. So I'll say this, I'm not an ITAR expert, but I'm sympathetic to some of the issues that ITAR compliance brings about. And we are interested in not sidestepping ITAR. We're not going to break the rules. We still have to abide by them. But we're actively interested in characterizing, hey, what is the impact of ITAR to these companies? And where can we make the cases to say, hey, is there a better way of doing this? Again, it goes back to the NTIB, National Technology Industrial Base. We're identifying there's areas where we can kind of improve that communication line. I had a Canadian, it was actually a U.S. company that has presence in Canada, and they were saying, I can't push data back and forth because of ITAR. I can send it one way, but not the other way, the exact same data. And it was very frustrating. You could see it on the engineer. He's like, I just want to sit down and I want to work with the data. I want to produce a product. I want to finish this. And I can't do it because of ITAR. You know, that gives me something I can, again, take back to my leadership and say, here's anecdotal evidence of things of impact because of the way we do business, how we're hurting the local community. And you know, we can have that discussion. We can say, how can we do this better?
We've covered a lot of ground here. Are there perhaps some closing thoughts you'd like to share with the group?
I really appreciate the time with you folks staying here. I know it's the last presentation, and sometimes that gets to be, you know, the end of the day is a long one sometimes. So I really appreciate your time. I appreciate the dialogue. I've been introduced to several people already here, and I look forward to, again, coming back and working with you guys and being an asset. Again, increasing some of the presence we have here in Southern California and kind of generating a clean path forward to how we can work together, build the public-private partnerships. I'm open to having any kind of discussion.
Outstanding. Darren, thank you for your time. Thank you for coming and the engagement. People, please come up and grab the man, get his card,
Thank you.
Connect.
Thanks, Will.